Title: The Boy Who Fell in Love with the Woman Next Door. It was a quiet evening in a small suburban town in Ohio. The sun was setting, and the golden light spilled softly across the streets, touching every rooftop before fading into dusk. An 18-year-old boy named Ethan Miller walked slowly down the empty sidewalks of his neighborhood. In his hands, he held an old, worn-out journal, the kind that had seen too many nights of sleepless writing. His face was calm, even handsome in a quiet way, but his eyes told a different story. A story of emptiness, confusion, and something far deeper. That journal carried his secrets, the things he couldn't tell anyone, not his parents, not his friends, because inside those pages, he had written about the woman who had unknowingly captured his heart. Her name was Rachel Adams. She lived just across the street, maybe 10 years older than his mom. Rachel had the kind of beauty that didn't shout. It whispered. Soft brown hair, deep eyes that looked like they carried a lifetime of sadness, and a smile that could light up a room, but rarely did. She lived alone. Separated from her husband years ago, she spent most of her days gardening, reading, or quietly sipping coffee on her porch as the world passed by. The first time Ethan saw her was at the local grocery store. He was grabbing a box of cereal when he bumped into her cart. She laughed softly, saying, "Looks like you've got a lot on your mind." And that smile, that simple, kind smile, stayed with him long after he left the store. After that, he began noticing her more often, walking her dog, watering her plants, or chatting politely with neighbors. And somehow, he found reasons to cross paths with her. At first, it was harmless. "Hey, Mrs. Adams, need help carrying those groceries? Your garden looks beautiful today." But soon, those small talks turned into longer conversations about books, life, loneliness. And without realizing it, Ethan fell deeply, painfully in love. But it wasn't just a crush. It was something that consumed him completely. He stopped hanging out with his friends. His grades began to drop. He couldn't focus on anything except her. At night, he'd sit by his window and stare at her house, wondering if she ever thought of him too. His parents, Mark and Linda Miller, began to notice. "Ethan, honey, you've been so distracted lately," his mother said one evening at dinner. His father frowned. "You're barely studying. Is something wrong?" Ethan just shook his head. They wouldn't understand. How could they? But the truth was, he was falling for someone he couldn't have. One evening, when his parents mentioned arranging college visits, he snapped. "I don't care about college right now," he shouted. His mom stared, shocked. "What do you mean? It's your future." But Ethan couldn't explain that his future already felt decided, bound to the woman next door. Days turned into weeks, and soon his obsession grew stronger. He started writing about Rachel in his journal every night. Her smile, her laugh, her scent of jasmine perfume. And then one day, everything changed. His parents had been talking about him with the neighbors, and somehow Rachel found out. That evening, she called him over. When he entered her house, the air smelled faintly of coffee and old books. She looked nervous but calm. "Ethan," she said gently, "your parents are worried about you." He looked at her with teary eyes. "I don't care what they think. I can't be without you." Rachel's breath caught for a moment. "Ethan, you're just 18. You have your whole life ahead of you." But he stepped closer. "I love you, Rachel. I really do." For a long second, silence filled the room, and then she whispered, almost brokenly, "Ethan, promise me something. Promise you'll never ruin your life because of me." But promises are easy to make when your heart is young and blind. He just said softly, "I'll never leave you." Weeks passed, His parents tried everything: therapy, strict curfews, even confiscating his phone. But Ethan only grew more distant. He'd sneak out late at night to see her. Sometimes, they'd just sit in her living room talking for hours. About life, about dreams, about pain. Rachel told him stories about her failed marriage, about how lonely she'd felt for years. And Ethan, in his naive love, swore to fill that emptiness. But slowly, his life began to crumble. He failed his senior exams. His friends stopped inviting him anywhere. His parents were at their breaking point. One night, during dinner, his father said, "Ethan, you're throwing your life away. That woman, she's not your future." Ethan clenched his fists. "You don't understand. She's the only one who cares about me." His father's voice rose. "If you don't stop seeing her, you can leave this house." And Ethan did. He walked out with just his backpack and that old journal. When Rachel opened her door that night and saw him standing there in the rain, her eyes widened. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "They told me to leave. I had nowhere else to go," he said, shivering. Rachel sighed deeply. "Oh, Ethan, you shouldn't have done that." But she couldn't turn him away. He moved in with her. For a while, it felt like a dream. They cooked dinner together, watched movies, laughed. Ethan finally felt alive. Or at least, he thought he did. But the dream didn't last. He began to notice things. How Rachel would sometimes stare at nothing, lost in thought. How she would avoid talking about the future. And one night, when he overheard her talking on the phone, everything shattered. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's still here. I don't know what to do. He says he can't live without me." Ethan's heart froze. He realized she wasn't happy, that maybe she was just pitying him. The next morning, he asked, "Who were you talking to?" Rachel hesitated. "No one, just a friend." But the lie was clear in her voice. Ethan began to see the truth. His love wasn't saving her. It was trapping both of them. His parents eventually found him. They came to Rachel's house, begging her to let him go. "Rachel," his mother said tearfully, "please, he's just a kid. Don't do this to him." Rachel's eyes filled with guilt. "Mrs. Miller, I never meant to hurt him." But Ethan refused to leave. "I'm not going anywhere." The argument tore through the quiet street that day, and when the neighbors began to whisper, Rachel finally realized this couldn't go on. That night, she sat beside him and said softly, "Ethan, you need to go back to your parents. Please, you deserve a real life." He shook his head. "I can't live without you." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Then you'll never really live at all." The next morning, when Ethan woke up, he packed his bag and left. For the first time, he didn't look back. He spent weeks alone, wandering between jobs, sleeping on a friend's couch, thinking about everything that had happened. And one day, he made a decision. He would leave, start over. He told his parents, "I need to get away from here, from everything." They agreed. And soon, Ethan moved to Los Angeles, starting an entry-level job at a tech company. Life wasn't easy, but it was new. He threw himself into work, trying to forget her. But late at night, when the city lights flickered against his apartment window, he'd still think about Rachel. The way she smiled, the way she said his name. And then, one morning, an email arrived. It was from her. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I was selfish. I held on to you because I was lonely. But you deserve more than that. You deserve a full life, not one trapped in my past. Take care of yourself, Rachel." Ethan stared at the screen for a long time, and then, for the first time in years, he smiled. A small, real smile. He whispered, "I forgive you." Years passed. Ethan rose through the ranks at work, eventually becoming a senior manager. He made friends, found passion again, even began to love his life. But one night, while sitting alone in his apartment, his phone rang. It was his mom. Her voice trembled. "Ethan, Rachel's in the hospital. She's not doing well." He froze. Without thinking twice, he booked a flight back to Ohio. When he entered the hospital room, he saw her, weak, pale, but still wearing that same gentle smile. "Ethan," she whispered, "you came." He held her hand tightly. "Of course I did." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry I left you." Rachel shook her head. "No, Ethan, you did the right thing. You lived your life. That's all I ever wanted." He sat beside her in silence, his heart heavy yet calm. For the first time, he felt peace. That night, when he left the hospital, he looked up at the sky. The same golden sunset painted the horizon, just like that evening years ago when it all began. He whispered softly, "Thank you for teaching me how to feel." Ethan returned to Los Angeles. He worked harder, laughed louder, and lived fully. He never forgot Rachel, but he finally learned to love her memory, not her shadow. Because love isn't wrong. It's just, sometimes, it comes at the wrong time, in the wrong way. And learning to let go is how we finally grow. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life emotional stories. Because sometimes the deepest love stories are the ones that never end the way we expect.